warning. This show features dark subjects which may be triggering to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
So, we're going to start this off with a advisory. There are crimes against children in this. So, if anybody's listening, you may want to turn it off now if it's going to trigger you.
I have one question.
Okay.
What's an advisory?
It's a caution.
It means, hey, look out for this.
Okay. I think I know what you mean.
You think you got it?
Yeah. It's like that thing I can't remember. You know what? Let's keep going anyway.
Okay.
Here's
So,
this helmet.
we are going to talk about the Wolf family massacre.
Okay.
Okay. What do you know about North Dakota?
That is a great question. I'm from Middle Dakota, Canada town. So we don't really learn much about the other Dakotas because we try not to say they exist. But you know,
Unrelated to your friend named Dakota.
yeah. Dakota Fanning, she's an actress.
I'm glad that you know those Dakotas.
Disclaimer, that's the word I was looking for.
There we go.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Yeah.
This is Pandora's Jar, where we talk about some dark and interesting topics, and I react to them. This guy, Ben, here, he tells us about them. Oh, also, there's Neva.
There's a brown guy in the corner just commentating. Like this one.
We always have the token dark guy.
Yeah. He's got a ponytail and everything.
I'm covering a lot of stereotype bases here.
Yeah.
The cynic.
We get a lot of that in Middle Dakota.
You assign all your tokens to one dense, ignorable token. Everyone else is a white fuck.
I almost went for that. Anyway.
So as I was saying, crimes against children in Turtle Lake, Dakota, North Dakota. All right. So, Turtle Lake, North Dakota is just a little town of about 580
Did you say
people.
Turtle Lake?
Turtle Lake.
Oh, okay.
It's not a
What
lake
did you-
full of turtles.
What did you think I said?
You said it really fast. Okay, sorry.
Okay. So it was founded in 1905, and from what I found on their website, the only thing they have going for them is that they do turtle races, which Turtle Lake, turtle races. I would assume there's turtles.
Yeah, by the time the first one ends, the next one has already started.
Now it's time for the semifinals.
Current with the quarterfinals.
We've been at this a week. Somebody just run over the turtles.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I don't promote animal violence. Thank you very much. Ugh.
Not approved behavior.
Yeah.
Dakota does not break for turtles.
So anyway,
Yeah.
home of the turtle races.
Yeah. So it was originally founded in 1905. The location was mainly because there was a railroad track there. They didn't have a governing body until 1909. But where we're going to be focused on is April 1920. I almost said 2020.
April 2020, when everybody was indoors trying to figure out what to do with themselves.
What is happening here?
I'm very, very bored.
So, April 22nd, 1920, John Kraft, who owned a farm just outside of Turtle Lake. Can't do this with that anymore.
He took off the headphones.
Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah. So he was driving past the Wolf's farm, which was just a couple of miles away from his own farm, when he noticed that his neighbors hadn't taken in their laundry from the clothesline and that it had been out overnight. He also noticed that there was a lot of horses untended in the yard. This is unlike Jacob Wolf, who, who was the patriarch of the Wolf family and owned and ran the farm. He was normally he kept the farm very neat, clean, and properly maintained. So Kraft decided that he was going to go check out the farm and, find out why his neighbors left their clothing out there. A little nosy, but it's the 1920s.
Yeah.
It used to be called neighborly.
Yeah.
I assume so.
Hello, neighbor. You've appeared to have left your clothing upon the lawn.
And your horses are running amok.
I do believe the clothing is more of an issue than the horses. Please get them before the horses get to the clothing.
There's a reason it's one of the Ten Commandments.
Exactly. Thou shalt not put horses into clothing.
Or yourself.
What happens? No, I'm seeing is like horses and suits. And
Yeah.
and then it goes to BoJack Horseman out of nowhere.
Oh my god. You took my image and I was just like, I was imagining like the tuxedos with the monocles and top hats, but no, BoJack Horseman, alcoholic actors.
I'm close to it.
Yeah.
I'll bring that next time.
The Gentleman Podcast.
So anyways.
Everyone believes that we're from Canada. Misconception.
You guys are t-shirts.
You're giving away secrets.
He's not a token at all.
And we're canceled.
Yeah, that's
Good
it.
night, guys.
That was the episode. We ruined it. Good to go.
So,
Anyways,
horses.
Kraft entered the farmyard, and he was looking around for anybody from the Wolf family. He couldn't find anybody, though. There was not a soul in sight. That's when he hears the sound of some rooting pigs, like, in the barn. So he decides to go check it out. And when he went there, was the ever in for a surprise. He found Jacob Wolf, who was 41 at the time, and his two daughters, Maria, who was 9, and Edna, who was 7, and they were hastily covered in dirt, hay, and manure inside of the barn.
Oh.
So Kraft rushes to the house to see if he could find anybody or, like, anything like
Alive.
that basically would tell, like, anybody alive or anything that would tell him, like, what happened here. And when he went in there, it was just the house was just as eerily quiet as the farmyard. He ended up finding Jacob's wife, Beata, who was 36, and another 3 daughters, Bertha, Lydia, and Martha, who were all aged... One moment here. Lost it in my notes.
Reference check.
Yep, got a reference check here.
We have employees to pay for this.
Yeah.
There will be editing later.
The interns will be getting...
Yeah.
They will not be as well dressed.
Yeah, I do hope you can edit out all the bad stuff.
Bertha was 12 and Lydia was 5. Maria was also 3. Yeah, so these are some pretty young kids and their parents. He also found the body of Jacob Hoffer, who was 13 and was a hired farmhand. All these bodies were found in the basement. All the bodies have been killed with shotgun blasts and a hatchet. Kraft searched the rest of the house, and he discovered one survivor, Emma Wolf, who was 8 months old. She was really lightly clad, and she was weak from hunger and the cold, because she's lightly clad. It's North Dakota. Yeah, it gets almost as cold as here.
Here in Middle Dakota.
Yeah. Middle Dakota. So
Canada town, USA.
This sounds like
Middle
another
Dakota.
rotisserie situation.
around we go. So John Kraft had discovered one of the most gruesome murders in North Dakota's history. North Carolina. So, the Wolf family they were a German family that immigrated from Russia. That threw me off a little bit, but then I realized that Russia was attached some German families had gone into Russia during after the war, trying to search for anything. Parts of land had been given to Russia.
Post-war immigration happens.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Oh, really? Eh?
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting search to go through, and a lot of a lot of German families did jump from being their territory being taken over in Russia, jumping into the States to try and settle the land because they felt that they could be prosperous farmers.
It is starting again.
War. It's really interesting. On my mom's side of the family, are German refugees who went to Ireland.
Oh, that's not bad.
So yeah, I'm Irish, German Irish there.
And you don't drink.
I know. They didn't need to know that.
I'm also I'm also an indigenous person who doesn't drink, so I'm just saying.
Wow.
Stereotypes.
That's weird. That's offensive.
Now I'm just
come on.
my
And yet the East Indians one who drinks.
They still think I'm white.
This is true.
No, he's just every minority.
All right. So Jacob Wolf was a prosperous farmer, kept the farm neat and well cared for, like I said. That's why John Kraft came to investigate the farm. He always stayed up to date on all the farming techniques. He was really frugal, and he was really hardworking. And he didn't appear to have any enemies. There was some friction between him and some of his neighbors, but never anything that would really account for this scale of violence. And nothing really ever warranted a large argument. It was always something very casual.
Right.
However, there was a friend of Wolf's that stated after the murders that Jacob had once told him that he feared one of his neighbors would do something to harm him. The friend had disregarded it until the news of the murders broke, and then he felt bad for disregarding his friend's pleas to him. The man reported it to Sheriff Ole Stefferud, but Wolf had not revealed the name of the menace who was coming after him, so unfortunately,
It's just hearsay, basically.
Yeah, his friend didn't have anything to go off of. It's not like he said this particular person was coming after me. So, Sheriff Stefferud, he had the bodies remain in the house until the investigation was completed. The sheriff was actually sitting in the house on a particular night with 3 other men. Emmanuel Hoffer, who was no relation to Jacob Hoffer as far as I could find. And the 2 other men, there was never any first names given for them. Their last name was Bossert, I think. Bossert.
Mossad? Like French?
I guess so.
Let me see.
Bossert.
No, I think that's Bossert.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like Colbert. He's actually Colbert.
Yeah, but Colbert
It would be
is
Bossard,
French.
Fancier sounding.
Anyways, it was getting early because they'd been up for most of the night. So Hoffer and the 2 Bossers decided to go and get some breakfast for themselves and bring back some for the sheriff. A few minutes after the trio left in Hoffer's car around 5:30, Sheriff Stefferud heard somebody outside, heard another car outside and decided to investigate the noise because there shouldn't be a car coming back. Why would these guys have come back?
Mm.
So the vehicle actually pulled up to the far side of the house and a man got out. Stefferud followed the man, and the man was looking around carefully, but he seemed pretty confident that he was alone, unaware that the sheriff was right behind him. He walked up to the farmhouse, glanced into the living room window, then turned his attention towards the barn. It was at this point that the sheriff basically called out to him and said, "Hey, what's going on?" So this started a chat because the man, his name was Henry Layer, and he was a neighbor of the Wolves, and he had a farm of his own about 1.5 miles away. He was also a German man who had immigrated with his family of his wife and 6 children. They'd all immigrated from Russia as well. He was a pretty prosperous farmer as well. Stefferud and Laird chatted for quite a while, just outside of the barn while they waited for Hoffer and the Bosserts to return. The sheriff made a note that Laird just kept his right hand in the pocket of his suit coat the entire time, though. The other
Odd.
Yeah. So the other 3 men returned with breakfast, and Stefferud found out that from Hoffer that the road back to town went right by Henry Layer's farm. Stefferud realized that Layer would have known that Hoffer and the men were at the house because somebody would have had to watch the bodies, and as soon as he saw the car leave, he thought that the farmhouse was left abandoned, so he decided to go and see what was going on. But this is all circumstantial, and he couldn't really prove that this was what brought Henry Lair over.
Could just be an opportunist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe try to rob the place or something. But anyways, he decided to seize the opportunity and come down to the farm, but he hadn't expected the sheriff to be there. So despite the suspicions, Lair really seemed eager to help with the investigation, and so they let him give a hand. He kept pointing out obvious things, though, and being really weird. Just,
Like he's trying to distract them.
Yeah, just to try and get their attention elsewhere. And he would also try and suggest ridiculous techniques of investigation, like, look behind these doors or things like that.
Have you ever tried sniffing for a fart?
In a barnyard full of manure.
The murderer may smell like manure, so if we follow the scent of manure,
we'll know exactly where he is. Mr. Lair, we are at a farm.
You're a farm. How do you even smell manure?
In which case, we're going to find it easily.
But anyways, through this whole time, again, his right hand never left his suit coat pocket. So, the sheriff made note of this again. This is really, really weird. Anyways, a bunch of other investigators from around the country, from around the state, actually showed up to give a hand with, the investigation. Mostly because the governor at the time was
the biggest killing ever in their state.
Yeah, this is a huge massacre, and
send everybody.
It's such a small community. It was raising such a ruckus that the governor wanted this to be taken care of. So he had sent some of his more trusted investigators as well to come and take a look, and probably to monitor the sheriff. At this point, Lair made an odd suggestion of going to the barn to search in the eggs. Again, really odd suggestions. Yeah, basically go search the chicken coop and in the hay in the barn by the chicken coop to see if he could find anything. In an earlier investigation where they had kind of just combed through a little bit to see it, they hadn't found anything, but one of the Bostards went with him, and unbelievably, Lair seemed to find a handful of empty shotgun shells.
Unbelievably being the right word.
But they weren't there originally, and they wouldn't have been missed when they were originally going through this section. The second thing that the sheriff noticed after the whole fact that he just miraculously pulled these shotgun shells out of there was his hand had come right out of his pocket.
Also, who would put shotgun shells by an egg?
Yeah.
You're not shooting by chickens.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would suspect the chickens.
Fair enough.
Did you know they're descendants of T-Rexes, the world's greatest killers? Yeah.
Just like a little chicken with a mare's leg, flipping it around. I mean, that would be bad.
This'll totally look like a suicide.
You want my eggs?
I'm gonna fuck you up.
All right.
We're professionals.
That's something.
So as the day went on, more people turned up to help with the investigation. Journalists picked up what they felt was a scoop and began printing that it appeared that there was more than one killer, which was never really confirmed, but they went with it anyways.
Sounds like they just made that up.
That's also crazy. How many people need to come in? Is it a community thing?
Well,
It's
again,
the biggest thing in the state, in a tiny state with nothing.
and North Dakota at this time was a really, really new state, so they didn't want anything to go missing by or
Also, your first press shouldn't be bad press, right?
Yeah.
So they want it solved to show they're competent.
Okay.
So
I see.
it's like first impressions in a really, really awkward way.
So
I thought you were going to say awkward date.
I mean, if you open with a murder and she sticks around,
If you open with a murder and solve it,
So,
you're
I-
bound to
so-
get laid.
so I know this is the first
that
date.
just sounds like it involves a corpse.
Me in the corner hanging out on Fridays. Lots of chicks.
Mostly in piles.
I just imagine now one of these detectives or the sheriff showing up to a date and being like, I solved that big family murder, right? Yeah, that's right. It ain't gonna suck itself.
Oh, jeez.
Anyways,
From there,
2 $1,000 rewards were offered for any kind of information resulting in arrest. In today's money, each reward was worth roughly about $12,900.
jeez.
So,
Yeah.
like inflation and all that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a horse and a couple buggies.
Yeah. Investigators chased all forms of leads, even arrested 2 men, but ruled them out. One youth was captured when he was wandering around a lake shore, and the posse just happened upon him, and they decided to beat him down, tie him up, and bring him to the sheriff for questioning, who then, after questioning him, set him free. Which makes me sit there and go, I would hate to just be minding my own business and walking by a lake shore, and then suddenly this
Mob.
group of people just descends upon me and then ties me up and then brings me to the sheriff, who then asks me if I killed a bunch of people. Like,
New Age witch.
It's just another example of the old blaming the young.
wow.
He was a youth.
Yep,
A
it's
youth.
true.
I mean, fine.
I
I'll
want to
just
know
sit
what
here
he
quietly.
was doing.
Just
So
skipping rocks.
on the case, there was very, very little to work with. They had found the murder weapon actually in a slough near the farm.
Okay.
So it was like a body of water. The handle was like sticking like a foot out. Yeah. So somebody just kind of chucked it and
Or threw it in it.
yeah.
Yeah.
All attempts to trace the owner, though, failed. The manufacturer at the time didn't keep records of who bought what.
They basically don't any today.
Anti-gun laws. So, as time went on, the investigators began to pick up a trail. They were really narrowing in on Henry Layer because it turned out that neighbor that Jacob Wolf had friction with was Henry Layer. There was a lot of talk about how Layer's livestock would actually very commonly trespass onto Wolf's land, and it turned out that one of Layer's cows had been bitten by one of Wolf's dogs. That was really rough to say. Layer definitely wasn't helping the case because he was going around town basically gossiping about the private lives of the entire Wolf family with other neighbors.
Well, this was a thing.
Yeah, he obviously had some beef with him.
He was not shy about being public with it, but
No.
decided not to mention any of that.
To the police. So that Wednesday was the service for the family. They actually lined up 8 coffins in front of the house. 5 were small. 5 were small coffins and 3 were larger coffins. Obviously, for the 5 smaller ones were for the daughters, and the 3 other ones were for the hired boy and the
parents.
But the infant made it, right?
Yeah, the infant was still alive. We'll actually talk about her at the end. They're at their gravesite. There's actually a gravesite, and I've actually seen this tomb.
Oh, there's like a monument?
Yeah, it's like there's like a small monument inside of the cemetery, and it does say, and I'm gonna completely butcher this, but D. Emeldete Family, or the murdered family.
Right.
Is that German?
Yeah.
Diet Emeldate? No, I'm speaking too Frenchy or
Yeah.
Japanesey.
That's just
This
it is
is not for us.
because I'm French, I don't want to say it how I would say it in French, but I do know that there's some slight overlaps in how you say things. So,
I know that first one would be Diet,
okay.
and that's about it.
And that's where we end, and that's German for today.
Yeah. Come
But-
back next week when we butcher another language.
Maybe Russian. Anyways, it was one of the biggest crowds for a funeral at the time. Among the attendees were many of the detectives, including Chris Martinson from Bismarck, who was more than likely sent there by the governor to keep an eye on the investigation. He'd also been a part of the large investigation at the farm, obviously. And then there was Sheriff Stefferud. Henry Lair was also there. Not surprising. He actually demanded that each of the caskets be opened so that he could gaze upon the face inside before turning to the next one last time.
What?
Yeah. And
they let him?
well, like I said, he basically made such a case about it that they did this, and of course the investigators all found this to be odd behavior and all made note of this.
That's incredibly vulgar.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Like kids.
If he didn't do it, like...
Well, not only that, shotgun wounds are not pretty.
No.
No, I know, but like...
Well, I don't know if they had corners who did rebuild back then.
I don't think
Especially in
so.
a small town, so what would be the reason?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, talk about just putting yourself out in the open there. Like, you must have balls just to be like...
It's a pretty
"Let me
bold
see
move.
them." Yeah.
Yeah. And then, how cool do you gotta be if you kill him to, like, have it open so you can gaze upon your victims' faces one last time after you basically shattered their faces? Like,
Is that like
That's-
the victory lap of a serial killer?
it's funny because part of the reason they let him in on the investigation was because of the old adage that, you know, the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. So it was a gamble that they were taking with that one.
The part that gets me is the see them one last time.
Yeah.
That's
It's crazy, eh?
that's really
too
creepy and
specific.
eerie. Yeah.
Ugh.
So,
Jesus.
unbeknownst to Lair, during the funeral, some other investigators were sent off to his farm. They did some small searches and actually questioned one of his daughters, who stated that her father had gone absent for quite a while one morning, the same week of the murder, but she couldn't quite remember what morning specifically. But another week and a half passed, and the tensions were really building in the town, because this is big news. This is a brand new town, and it's
People want answers.
middle of nowhere,
That's some
and
scary stuff.
yeah, some guys going around shooting up like kids
Entire
and families and using a hatchet to butcher little girls and stuff. Like,
And
yeah.
the entire state can't put an answer to this.
So there was such a great deal of fear of this madman that they were putting a lot of pressure on law enforcement. And the citizens even raised the bounty by another $10,000, which is, in our day and age, is about $130,000.
But there was already a posse rolling
And there's
around.
already one, yeah.
Jesus. Someone's going to get lynched.
So McLean County, which is where Turtle Lake is located inside of North Dakota, the state attorney, Williams, I never managed to get his first name. He wanted a quick resolution, but he also didn't want to do any ill-advised arrests or any other blunders, mostly because, and this is another reason why the governor was making sure that there was a lot of coverage on this from his own men. There was already a scandal that had hurt the reputation of the county when a young man was arrested and thrown into jail before being forgotten for 3 days.
Holy shit. He could have died from dehydration from that. That is not a fun way to go.
Yeah. So, because of this, Williams insisted there has to be a mountain of evidence.
So completely contradictory requirements.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So, anyways, they felt they had enough circumstantial evidence on Henry Lair that they actually arrested him on May 13th of 1920. He asked to have permission. When he was being arrested, he asked for permission to have a team of horses hitched to a wagon so that his family could go stay with some neighbors, as his wife would be too afraid to stay in the house alone. And they did grant this request. Afterwards, he kissed his wife goodbye, said goodbye to his children, and in his goodbyes, it basically seemed as if he knew he was never going to return. So, the police wanted to add as much evidence as possible to all of this, so they had actually constructed a ruse for when they were en route to the jail in Washburn, North Dakota.
Like an ambush?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
One of the detectives disguised himself as a fugitive and allowed himself to be captured in a really dramatic fashion.
Inside man.
The hope was that once in jail, the fugitive, who was wearing a recording device, would be able to engage a conversation with Lair and have him reveal something incriminating. However, it turned out that Lair wasn't much for conversation, and the ruse was completely in vain. Can you just imagine putting this all together, being like, this is going to be brilliant, and then him
just doesn't talk.
And then
You just sit there and be like, hey, how's it going?
What's up?
Yeah. What did they get you for? I don't really want to talk.
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, man. If you don't want to talk about, I would be very proud about my crimes, achievements. Like
I would boast about them.
Boast.
We're better than that.
Loudly and so much so that it makes great, interesting radio on a podcast several thousand years from now.
We got to work on your math.
What?
I forgot.
What year do you think it is?
I forgot the date. I have ADD and memory loss happens a lot.
Murder hornets.
Like an exponential difference.
Between 100 years and anyways, they get him to the jail, and on the first night there was a little bit of questioning, but
Not much.
it didn't really do nothing. The next day they really began in earnest as well. There wasn't a lot coming out of Henry, and they just kept hammering him with these questions and demanding to confess. Like, we know you killed them. Why did you do it? Why did you do this? Why did you butcher these little girls? Why did you do this? Why did you kill him? Why did you shoot him? Lair remained really strong and maintained his innocence through all of it.
Like, he didn't stay quiet. He was saying he didn't do this.
Yeah, he was being strong about, I didn't do any of this.
Even after a full goodbye suite to the family?
Yeah.
All right.
And they just kept hammering him with this questioning, and it was a really long interrogation.
Like, how many days?
It's only one day, but Frank Sturkin, who worked for the Bismarck Tribune, who was a local paper, he was stationed in a room close by, and he would receive updates from the interrogators. As time kept flowing, a confession just seemed really hopeless at this point, like they weren't going to get one. So Sturkin made a suggestion, and it proved pretty fruitful. They used photos of the mangled corpses and the surviving infant and kept hammering him with those questions and then throwing these pictures in front of his face. And they would just keep repeatedly doing this. And why would you kill him? And why would you leave this little girl without a family? And
That cracked him?
And Lair broke down and confessed. So this is the way that Lair says it went down. And this is from his confession. Lair confessed that there had been a lot of confrontation brewing between Wolf and himself for a long time, and it was finally coming to a head. One of Wolf's dogs had actually bit one of Lair's cows when the cow had trespassed onto the land. This was actually, yeah. And there was a little bit of damage to the livestock, so he had gone to the farmhouse and he had confronted Jacob Wolf inside of the house.
Inside his own house?
Yeah, inside his own house. He had been invited in because, neighborly, and like they were going to have a discussion. And he demanded that he get compensation for the damages to his livestock. This turned into an argument, and Wolf asked Lair to leave. Lair refused, of course, because he wants his compensation for this, and this is when, according to Lair, Jacob went and produced a double-barrel shotgun and began loading it.
I mean, he's in his own house.
This resulted in a scuffle, and the gun accidentally went off, striking and killing Wolf's wife, Beata, and the hired hand, Jacob Hoffer.
A twofer?
Yeah. So I guess both barrels discharged and took them both out.
Well, with a double barrel, you shoot once and one goes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Jacob Wolf then abandons the gun and runs out of the house and into the yard. This is when Lair reached for ammunition inside of the dresser that he had watched Wolf pull the original shells out from and loaded the gun. Lair then gave chase and fired a round into Jacob's back, which then hit him. He then proceeded to walk up and finish him off with a second close-range shot. Maria and Edna, who were 9 and 7, heard the shots fled into the barn,
That explains
and this
it.
is when...
That explains
And
it.
this is when Lair followed them in and shot them dead. According to Lair, he stated that Edna pleaded for her life as he pressed the gun against her and fired.
Jesus Christ.
Lair then proceeded to the house and shot both Bertha, who was 12, and Lydia, who was 5. And buckle up, because then he turned his attention to Maria, who he bludgeoned to death with a hatchet. She was 3 years old. He covered the bodies in the barn and pushed the bodies in the house into the cellar. Then he went home.
Just like nothing.
Yeah. When he was asked why he spared Emma, he said the only reason that he spared her was because he didn't find her. He didn't find her.
Jesus.
I guess she didn't cry. I guess she didn't, even though that's quite a ruckus.
Yeah. I mean, maybe some sort of weird instinct kicked in.
Yeah. Later stated the first killings were accidental, and this left him in a real, haze while committing the other murders. The confession came around 12:30 a.m., so they had to wait to present the confession to a judge until around noon the following day. Lair pleaded guilty and was pleaded guilty. He was asked by the judge quite a few times if he wanted to have an attorney present, if he realized what he was doing by pleading guilty, and he said he understood.
So he was of sound mind.
That he understood and that he was pleading guilty to get it over with, and he was sentenced to life in prison at hard labor. So, while he was in prison, though, he did eventually retract the confession. He stated that the police had bullied him into confessing and threatened to turn him over to that murderous posse. But scholars are still kind of half in on half off on this one, whether or not he did do it or didn't do it. I kind of
It's a valid threat.
I kind of feel it because there was a posse out there. He knew that even if he was released,
they're going to get him.
they're going to come after him. They might go after his family if he doesn't plead guilty to this.
That being said, even if he didn't do it, he acted so weird about everything up to it.
That's what gets me, right? Also, the long interrogation is what gets me too. And then, the fact that he had to look at those bodies, that's where I kind of go, he looked at the bodies in the casket, but then I guess to see them at a crime scene is kind of...
Too much? That doesn't make sense.
I don't know. That's just it. Is did the blood and everything get him then or something? Or was it the little girl? Was it realizing that the little girl survived and then putting that pressure on him? Who knows?
Well, the little girl couldn't be a witness, so it's not really pressure. It doesn't add up.
Well, the fact that, you played to the hamstring, the heartstrings of, you left her as an orphan and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but does heartstrings work on someone who does that?
Who knows?
Yeah, I guess.
Alternatively, one thing that is could be said about some of his actions, not to justify them, because there's a good chance he's probably the murderer in this case, but being a German immigrant might have different traditions, which caused him to act different in certain ways.
That's very true.
Also, if they both came out of the war, dissociation was pretty common.
Exactly, and he says goodbye to his family because immigrants are easier to probably convict than someone who's...
And there would still be a little bit of animosity towards the German family because of the...
Understatement.
Yeah.
Not only German, but being successful.
Yeah.
But then it's weird that they would parse it as German on German.
Yeah.
It's all sorts of weird.
Yeah.
Anyways, Henry Lair did die 5 years after his conviction. He died in prison from complications from surgery for appendicitis.
Not unusual, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially after hard labor.
Yeah. And just like today, back then, if you go into prison, you're not meant to survive very long. There's a lot of talk about it, about how some prisoners do and some prisoners don't, but they don't exactly give you the best treatments in prison.
No. I mean, the specifics of that now could be discussed another time.
So, Emma Wolfe, the sole survivor. She lived a very long life. She died in 2003.
Seriously?
Yep. She was initially raised by the Hoffer family, so I'm guessing not the farmhand, but I'm guessing the other one.
Yeah.
They were her aunt and uncle. But at age 6, she discovered that they were not her actual parents and that they were actually her aunt and uncle. Her uncle passed away in 1932, and her aunt passed away the following year in 1933.
She would have been pretty young.
Yeah. She was then passed off to like another family for a short term. It wasn't really discussed, but then her final guardian was a local grocer named Emil Haas, whose family she lived with until she graduated high school at the age of 18.
Pretty normal fostering, I guess.
Yeah. Her son, Kurt Hansen, though, stated that she was always known as the Wolf Girl, and that title haunted her for her entire life. She was the only one to survive this.
With no personal context either.
Yeah, and she still technically owned the family farm.
Right.
Which was sitting dormant all these years. She never really escaped the entire ordeal. It was always being brought up to her. So eventually she married a man named Clarence Hansen. So Kurt Hansen. Who moved the entire family back onto the farm and resurrected it around 1949. They had 3 children, but Kurt is the only surviving child. He's 75. He had 2 sisters, but apparently they had passed away. I couldn't find their ages. The land currently lies dormant, just basically a reminder that this horrible crime had happened.
Is there a monument there? Was it just kind of sealed off private land?
I'm not certain. I'm not certain if they buried. I think they buried the family on the land, but I'm not sure.
Probably not.
Yeah.
They wouldn't want the attention.
Yeah. So important little notes in this, though, which is another reason why I'm going to say, like, the layer conviction is it's really debated. There's absolutely no physical evidence that Layer committed any of these crimes. There was no physical link to him. It was just all circumstantial. They really built it on the circumstantial and the confession.
Was there anything on the shells that he likely dropped?
That's just it. Is they didn't do any of that.
They didn't do any of that.
Really, a really curious thing about it is that Henry was actually a model prisoner. While he was in prison, even though it was hard labor, he was really well dedicated to the roles that he was given. He even became the head of laundry at one point.
One could argue that's a bit of a cultural tradition.
Yeah. The Layer farm was also 1.5 miles from the Wolf farm, so the fact that his livestock was trespassing, it's more of a he didn't care kind of thing, rather than and I'm sure that's why Wolf probably trained his dogs to get them out of here,
as opposed to something considerably more drastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Sheriff Steffrud, who went through the entire investigation and everything, at the time of the investigation, he was only 34. So for what he was doing was he was putting a lot of his career right on this, right? Like he was in the prime of his career. He had probably solved a lot of crimes, done a lot of his due diligence and so on. So him trusting his gut and kind of just going with this, I can't see him having done it just because of the pressure around them. He would have been a little more accustomed to the pressure of the town. But, the shady practices could be shady practices.
Yeah, also without a lot of accountability, particularly then. So, it could go either way. And without knowing any of the people directly, how do you say?
Yeah. Also, it happened over 100 years ago, so there's nowhere near the forensics that we have now.
Mm-hmm. 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Just like that undercover cop said.
It was you! You're immortal!
There can be only one.
It took 100 years to learn to act.
It did. I also have a poor perception of time. Very common with ADHD.
And immortality.
I know, because the last 10 hours of recording have just been brutal.
What?
Editing.
Yeah.
Well, that was horrific.
Yeah. That was terrible. This one gets really, for some reason, again, I'm guessing because of the German, ties to it, it gets compared a lot to the Hinterkaifeck murders from Germany itself.
Which is...
So, I'll have to do something with that at one point, but it's a really famous case. It's basically this German family, their housekeeper heard noises, would hear noises and thought that the house was haunted. They would also find odd things like newspapers nobody had bought, and keys would go missing, things like that. And then one morning they realized that there was like there hadn't been a lot of activity on the farm, and so somebody came to take a look at it, and almost all the members of the family were bludgeoned to death in the barn and covered in hay, which
Similar-ish.
yeah. And then it looked like somebody had been living in the house. They'd also killed the brand new housekeeper and the infant that was living there. So nobody survived that one, and it was never solved.
No, there's no evidence.
There was a few suspects and stuff, and if I do an episode on that, I'll go through it.
Yeah.
But
Was that in Germany?
it was actually in Germany. Yeah,
Jeez.
it was it's a really, really famous case. There was a lot of things. There's like rumors of like incest and the fact that the daughter wanted to move away and things like that.
Well,
Whoa, slow down, guys.
Anything with no narrative, people make a narrative. So that makes sense.
Guys, let's hold off until we get to that episode.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, let's not overdo it.
Analyze.
Yeah, well, yes, we can overanalyze, but when we get to the episode, we don't want to spoil everything now. People want their narrative. Because there is none, and we're going to tell them one.
All right.
Alrighty.
Got a closer?
All right, so that is the show. Thank you for listening to Pandora's Jar. Hopefully we'll get another episode up and running soon. And I've been J Wes Secord.
Well, please rate and review.
Oh, yeah, and press the like button and the bell to subscribe or whatever.
5 stars, Apple Podcast.
Yeah. YouTube's whatever. I don't know where we are.
the thing, so we know you like it.
But yeah, I'm J Wes Secord. This is Ben.
Token.
And this is Token. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night.